Over the past few years, everything has changed. Where and how we work and live, the way we collaborate and measure success, and the emerging technologies we use to get it all done. Welcome to The Bridge. Join our host, Scott Kinka, in a series of discussions with top leaders in technology and learn about how they bridge their lives and their businesses into our new hybrid work and AI-driven reality. Our hope is that the insights and experiences will help you on your journey in business and in life from who we were to who we are today. And maybe it'll help you get better prepared for whatever comes next. The Bridge is a service of Bridgepoint Technologies, the nation's leading IT advisory firm. Bridgepoint helps business leaders evaluate, procure, implement, and manage technology and customer experience solutions with a focus on realizing sustainable results for your business growth. And now, here's your host, Scott Kinka.
AI, or artificial intelligence. Is this how the world ends, or how smarter business begins? At Bridgepoint's Tech Summit in October of 2023, we asked just that question of 4 industry leaders, and we did it in front of 450 of our closest friends. On this episode of The Bridge, you're going to join us in Palm Springs for the first part of that discussion. We're splitting this talk into 2 parts to make sure you can get through it at the gym or on your commute. This is not a light discussion. In this first episode, we seek simply to define what artificial intelligence is and is not. And as you can probably imagine, we didn't always agree. We overviewed the various technologies that make up what we believe modern AI to be. We talked about considerations or concerns about its use. And not surprisingly, that spiraled into bias, the digital divide, autonomous weapons, and the potential of the AI singularity. So buckle up. Here we go deep into the matrix for our first live episode of The Bridge. Join us for both parts of this episode by following The Bridge with Scott Kinka on your favorite podcast platform. Here we go. Part 1 of a practical discussion about AI here on The Bridge. Thank you. It's a good thing I don't take myself too seriously. Thanks, Gene. I appreciate that. Felt great. Welcome to our first live podcast of The Bridge. Can I hear it? Let me give it up. Thank you. And for those of you who are listening at home, we'd like to welcome you into our space. We are here in sunny and slightly warmer than we might have hoped, Palm Springs, California, at Bridgepoint Tech Summit 2023 with 450 of our closest friends. One more time, 450 of our closest friends is here. All right, so they are incredibly well trained for the listeners at home. We practice the clapping and the noise. Okay. Our topic today is an interesting one. We've chatted about it time and time again on the pod. And we felt we had an opportunity to ask a very simple question. Right? Is this how the world will end or how smarter business begins? Right? There's a lot of hype. There's a lot of crazy. We're going to try to get through that today with some of the smartest people that we know in this space who are focusing on this. So I will not introduce them individually. I'll let them do it for themselves. So aside from being an NFL coach, I'm going to let Dan O'Connell start here.
Yeah, so I'm Dan, pleasure to be here, and I'm Dialpad's Chief AI and Strategy Officer. I oversee our product and eng teams on the AI side. I joined Dialpad 6 years ago. They acquired my startup, which was a real-time speech recognition NLP startup, which is a fancy way of saying we can capture conversations, transcribe them, and tell you what's happening with them.
Fantastic. Thanks, Dan. Dan was a late game change on the panel, so I had to make sure that I had it right there. My apologies on the kerfluffle. Karen, you're up.
Hi, I'm Karen Bowman with Level AI. I run Global Channel, and I just want to say thank you so much for having us here, Scott, and Bridgepoint, Ohana family. And wow, I mean, AI sure has become an exciting topic. I've been at Level AI, like I said, just about a year. It was pretty exciting when I started, like looking at that technology was like, wow, this could really be something different and really change the game. And then, ChatGPT hit the world, and we all kind of went nuts after that. So for those of you that don't know Level AI, we're a contact center intelligence platform, and we use AI to enable analytics and all sorts of things, automate tools, and that amount of automation drives back to us being able to really drill down to the true voice of the customer and solve root cause problems. So I tend to focus more on the point solutions and the things that AI can do, but I think this is gonna be a really fun panel.
Fantastic. Karen, thank you. Tushar, Shah.
So I'm Tushar Shah. I'm the Chief Product Officer at Uniphore. Been there a little less than 6 months. Prior to that, ran a large technology at PayPal around machine learning, both in the risk compliance and ultimately also all of our CS. So about 12,000 agents worldwide, BPO, badged employees. And so actually am unique in the fact that I was also a buyer of this technology. And so excited to be here and obviously bring my experience to this panel, but ultimately more broadly to the products and services that we offer.
Tushar, that's super interesting. You mentioned that you're an IT buyer, so expect to get a phone call from about 40 people when this panel's over. Raghu, Ravinutala.
Hello, everyone. I'm Raghu. I'm co-founder and CEO for Yellow AI. We are the world's largest conversational AI company in terms of automated interactions. We've been so fortunate to partner with Bridgepoint. At this point of time, the company automates 5 billion plus interactions for our customers every single year. 1,500 of global enterprises that work with us, and we help them put their customer service on autopilot. Recognized on Gartner Magic Quadrant, backed by some of the best venture capital firms in the world. So excited to be here and share our learnings bringing AI to this market from 2016.
Fantastic. Thank you, Raghu. Anytime you get into this conversation, you sort of have to start with a baseline before you can start poking at it, right? So we thought we would start with just some simple questions, pass them around the panel, try and get a shared understanding of what's going on now, and then we can get into the meat and potatoes and start throwing it around. So we're going to start with just a simple question. There's a lot on this slide, not asking you to read it. AI, branch of computer science, involves building machines capable of performing tasks that typically require human intelligence. Right? And then a little bit about the importance. The trick to this slide is we asked AI to create the slide. All right? And there's more to that. We're going to unpack that throughout the panel. But let me start there. Dan, let's just chat about, how did AI do defining itself?
Yeah, I always think of how do I describe this to my mom, because my mom still doesn't understand what exactly I do.
Perfect.
And so the easiest way to think about it is how do you go and simulate human intelligence in a computer? And so how do you teach a computer to do things that we take advantage of and do today pretty seamlessly? So that might be, how do we go transcribe a conversation? How do we teach a computer to go compose music? Today, I think we're all enamored by large language models, their abilities to go and generate the first draft of a blog post or perhaps compose a piece of music. So that's really what the opportunity is for AI as we see it today in the technologies, but obviously we're probably going to get into, what are the advancements and where does this all get to in terms of singularity and so forth, and I think it'll be pretty interesting.
We're certainly going to get there. But interesting, actually, and the trick to the front of these slides is we didn't design any of them, although the marketing department thought that I somehow fell over myself and no longer had PowerPoint skills. We asked AI to both write the slides and design them. So we'll unpack that a little bit as we go forward. I'm going to go to Raghu on this one. We asked ChatGPT to describe the technologies that underlie what it does, and this is what it gave us back. We don't need to read. If you want to unpack any of them, we do it. Chat through those individually if you would first, and then is it missing anything?
Yeah, I don't think it is missing, but I would like to broadly categorize this entire technology around AI as learning at the core. Just like humans, right from our childhood, we are fed with a lot of information, content across different modalities, and we keep learning and react to things based on that learning. At the core of AI the computer is fed with information, knowledge, and patterns, and the technology enables and creates either new content or makes decisions or predicts the answers based on all this learning. So that's at the core of AI. Machine learning has been a part of AI where it is primarily focused on pattern recognition and predicting based on those pattern recognitions. And natural language processing is AI applied to languages. So AI can be applied to vision, AI can be applied to various sets of data, but natural language processes, especially in understanding human language, trained on textual data, trained on voice data, and enabling predictions and enabling generation using natural languages. Deep learning is a sort of neural networks. Won't get too deep into the technology, but you can kind of think about very, very deep multimodal information and data like images, videos, and deep learning kind of creates patterns around disjointed set of information and enables, again, prediction generation using completely disjointed set of data and learns from that pretty automated in an automatic way. And robotics is using all these technologies in enabling physical moving robots that can do things and make decisions and do physical things like humans. That's broadly an unpack of how these technologies are.
Good definition. You did mention both of you mentioned large language models in there, and generally speaking, they feed machine learning and some of the other things there. But does somebody want to just explain a large language model to this team?
Yeah, so think of a large language model. You can think of it, again, I think of how do I explain this to my mom, because she asks. It's just think of it as a text generator, a text predictor. So you can go to a large language model. You typically will interact with it. A lot of the user interface today is a text prompt. So you can go ask it, as I said, to write a first draft of something for you. And so it will essentially, it's leveraging, think of it like a library. It's got all of this really immense data set. It can go use that knowledge to then generate a first draft of something that you're asking for. It has basically that knowledge. But just think of it as a text generator.
Yeah, and the beauty of it is actually goes beyond the actual ability to provide the input, which you typically would see in a search, where you would get a bunch of different websites. It actually scrolls those websites and actually gives you an answer. So that's why it's been somewhat of a huge phenomenon, right? For a lot of, because essentially it has become democratized, where everybody now is using it as an alternative to doing search, because it ultimately also gives you the answer. You don't actually have to go through various hyperlinks to get the information you're looking for.
And there's a whole landscape of next step questions that creates. And we'll get to some of those in a couple of slides. I'm going to go to Tushar on this one. I asked the AI, and I love the picture. That's what I guess that's what it thinks. I guess that's what ChatGPT thinks it looks like. Just setting some baselines. I'll describe it, and then I'm going to want you to sort of, read back on a couple of these. Yep. Let's be very clear about the end of the world here. A stands for artificial, right? Pretty clear. Second, and this gets back to the large language models, it needs data, right? Every AI is not connected to every bit of data that was ever created in the world, right? If it was, then maybe we'd be talking about Skynet. But it's a slightly different thing. It needs a set of data, okay? The third thing is you need to ask it to do something. It's not just sitting around. Like it doesn't wake up in the morning, have a cup of coffee, and think about what to do for the day, right? It waits until you have something to do with it, all right? I think these are the most important ones, and Tushar, I'm going to ask you to sort of play with this, but the work that's being done to produce these outcomes is referential in nature. It's got a data set, it's got a piece of data over here, it's got a piece of data over here. It tries to equate them and come up with some kind of answer. But what it's not designed to be, and we'll have some fun with this question later, it's not designed to be self-referential. And that's a lot of what's going on right now and all, some of the chaos that we're hearing. Tell us a little bit about that, if you would, Tushar.
Yeah, I think the biggest conversation we have when we talk to companies, especially at the enterprise level, is one, how do I leverage AI in my ecosystem? And to your point, it all starts with the data. And so for many enterprises, they have unstructured, structured data. They've got data that sits in spreadsheets. They've got data that sits in applications. And so clearly, the value proposition is companies that can help them kind of bring that data to life and autonomize it so that it actually can be consumed. And I think that's what really differentiates companies that are out there that are pure AI players, but ultimately can actually solve also the data problem, which is kind of the focus that we have at Uniphore. And so I think when we look at referenceability, it is important to actually put it in context of the problem you're trying to solve, right? I equate it to if you need a hammer, don't bring a sledgehammer, right? And I think that's the typical, when you don't know like what to do and how to get it done, your first response is, well, it must be the biggest tool in the shed that I need to be able to do what needs to get done. And I think understanding the business problem you're trying to solve and understanding the context of that problem, then bringing reference to that allows you to actually create the better experience and the outcomes that you're looking for, whether they be a financial outcome, a customer engagement outcome, or a sales outcome, and so on and so forth. And so that referenceability is extremely important, and that's why the data, the ability to understand and digest the data, break it out into its piece parts, and ultimately even think about it from an industrial perspective, right? Whether it be airlines, banking, financial services, so on and so forth. Because today, large language models, as we've been talking about, essentially consume the web, right? So it pretty much can answer any question. It can tell you how to cook, chicken tikka, or how to cook the best bolognese, right? But if I'm in the airline industry, that's not really what I'm trying to answer. I'm trying to answer, how do I answer the question of, hey, my customer lost their bag. How do I provide them the support they need? So I think the referenceability is extremely important, and that starts with the data.
I mean, it's a great call out. We, as you know, many of the people in this room consult with clients on a day-to-day basis. And of course, to me, AI is the new cloud, like, the board level. Go do AI. I don't really know what that means, but okay, I'll go figure that out. And we regularly get asked questions. Hey, the first place I want to go is, I'm going to put bots in my contact center, and I'm like, that's great. Are the policies for the live agents written down so it has something to learn from? No. Well, I mean, there's not a whole lot that the bots are going to do with that, but it's going to write your process. It's got to start from somewhere, or at least have, to your point, something to reference to start from. Connecting dots, right? We'll play a little bit with the self-referential thing later in a fun question, but I'm going to get to Karen right now. So that's really funny. I hadn't even noticed that. We had the cute robot on the baselines, and then we had the angry one on the considerations. Okay, so a couple of considerations. I explicitly asked it, what are the risks? What are people concerned about around AI? And this is what it gave us back. Karen, how did ChatGPT do, describing itself in your mind on considerations?
Yeah, well, honestly, when I look at that, I think that it probably did pretty well because it called out some negative stuff. It wasn't just positive like the other slide.
Yeah.
And I think these are real concerns. I'd probably start with 1 and maybe 4 on this list and then have a really good time with the other ones, on the science fiction side of the bar. But I think there are applications there. So when you think of job or industry replacement, that could happen, right? And to your point, like cloud, a lot of people were afraid they were going to lose their jobs in cloud. Instead, I'm sure there's a lot of you making quite a good living on, security in cloud, optimizing it. How does all the network work for that? I mean, there's a plethora of stuff in cloud. And I think it's going to be the same in the CX space. You're going to see mundane tasks like auto summaries and auto QA and things like that just, we do as standard today that just weren't able to be done a short time ago, come to bear. So I think that, yes, jobs will switch and flux, but I think that the opportunity for all of you as strategists is going to be huge because when customers are confused, that's when we all win, right? Because we get to go be trusted advisors and help them. When I look at AI-generated bias, that one I think would be so much fun to have a conversation deep down. I think societal bias is just there, and it's there in ways we wouldn't even think. You think bias, you may think, oh, bad things or ways, but it can be simple things too that create bias. And it gets back to Tushar saying it's the data. Where does the data come from? So if you're pulling data from the web to answer a question, you've got to understand, did that data come from a reputable place? Is it even correct? Did the associations that the AI make, were they correct or relevant, or did they cause what they might call a hallucination, where it very confidently gives you an answer that is wrong? But how can you tell whether it's right or wrong, and you don't know what bias has been put in that? So From our perspective, we create each customer their own large language model, and then we ingest all of their information, interaction information, whether it comes from a CRM, their CCaaS, their UCaaS, a learning management system, Snowflake, a database, whatever. But that allows us to have this deep analytics to go look through that. And the bias in that is there's probably still some there, but it's much more addressed because it's what they're feeding the system.
Sure.
So
it's the company's data, effectively.
It's the company's data. Again, Tushar, you made a great point. The airline industry doesn't care necessarily, how Starbucks serves coffee, but they should.
Karen, you brought up an interesting point, and I'll open this up to everybody, going off script, but it was a good point, around learning. I mean, I don't think people understand what that means, learning or training models and sort of how that goes. Anybody want to just explain the concept to the room where you're training a model?
I know I just spoke, but I'd love to do that because, I'm not at the same technical level as the folks here. I run channel. I've been in technology my whole career, so I've been exposed to a lot of stuff. But here's what resonated for me in trying to really understand when I got to Level AI, like how is this different than anything else? And it gets down to a couple principles. One is, before you had natural language understanding, which is understanding the intent that we have now, it was just looking for words, right? Keywords. And that's what most searches were giving back to us is keywords. So, when you think of it understanding intent, you can boil it down to a simple analogy of like a 2-year-old. So if you have a 2-year-old or you've had one, you see that they learn not just by you telling them, like you don't necessarily tell them, take that spoon, put it in the bowl, put it up to your mouth, and eat. They get a vast array of input. They see people eating. They see you using a spoon, and then they deduce, like, oh, that's how this works. When you move into generative AI and ChatGPT type of things, it's the same thing. They're correlating things. So in a simple sentence can be, like, the sky is, if you asked an unintelligent platform, unless you had pre-programmed it with preset words to answer that, it wouldn't know what to do. But in a generative model, that's going to basically say the sky is blue because it's going to pull in all this input that it's blue. It may also say it's above us, or it may say it's large, right? But you can then look at those and correlate, and if you put this into a contact center, an agent can look at that and say, this is the top 3 ways this has been solved before. 2 looks like exactly what I'm talking about, and they can thumbs up that, and then it becomes a feeder into your knowledge base. So the applications are huge, but boiling it down to the simple concepts, I think, will help all of us. You need to understand it because your customers need you to help them navigate these pretty complex waters.
Yeah, I think the key in that you mentioned, I'm just going to pull it out of there so that we make sure that everybody hears it, is, another data point that becomes part of the data set that AI is using to make references is the use of itself, right? That's the concept, is that it improves over time because of the questions you ask it and how you respond and what your follow-on question is, and the questions that you ask become part of the data set that are used. So it gets to the point where it starts to learn, hey, this is generally what happens after that. Even if it wasn't explicitly written in the initial model that it was used, it'll figure that out over time. Anybody else want to tuck in on that?
I was going to say, Tushar made a really nice point, which is, if we're talking in the reference of like large language models, so ChatGPT, Anthropic, Inflection, Vertex, there's a bunch of them. You can think of them like the Library of Congress. And so they're the biggest tools. They've got this, they're trained on essentially the entirety of the internet up until 2021. So they have all of this knowledge, but not all of that knowledge you need. So if you needed to go and summarize a conversation, well, I don't need to have all of this other extraneous knowledge that's there in that data set. And if you think about building a data set, you need a bunch of storage for it, and you need a bunch of GPU power. So the bigger these models are, like these large foundational models, they need the biggest, fastest GPUs from NVIDIA called A100s today. And NVIDIA can't make those, it can't make them fast enough. There's not enough silicon. There's too much demand. And so what you'll see businesses do, us and Level AI, and I'm sure the others, are trying to build smaller models. And if you build these smaller models, one, they're better, more accurate. You can go leverage the customer data, right? You can go and I say this, you strip it all personally identifiable information, you make it anonymous, but the use case becomes much more specific. It also becomes faster, better, cheaper for the business and just the user experience. So that's just another kind of reference point for you to think about as you engage with your customers and talk about this, is understanding there's these really large, really big tools that are part of a system, these large foundational models, and then you'll also see, I think many businesses realize that those potentially have some challenges at scale. Cost may not be as accurate, and you'll see some businesses focus on building their own models.
Yeah. If one of those challenges is you're an AI company and you need data center space that's supportive of those GPUs, we know a guy who can help you. He's in this room. Talk to Mel Millara. Okay. Pushing this forward. While AI has the potential to create new jobs, there are concerns that the rapid pace of automation could lead to widespread job displacement, particularly for low-skilled workers. So we're going to tuck into each one of these concerns for a moment. I'll give you one additional data point. Boston Consulting Group shows a significant gap in understanding and experimentation of IT tools. So 36% of employees, 36%, believe that their job is likely at some point in the future to be eliminated by AI. All right. So the question now, to the panel here is let's take it from the HR perspective for a moment. We're moving really fast. Are we inadvertently widening the digital gap between, the executives and technical information workers who are doing testing and playing, and then the frontline employee base? Is this going to complicate this process?
So, go ahead. So I was going to say that the likelihood would have been yes, but I think by the fact that now everybody is leveraging some type of chat GBT type or large language model based solution. I mean, my sister the other day was, can you download an app for me that I can actually leverage, because I've heard all about this and I don't want to be left behind. And so I think if I look at where AI and machine learning was even just 4 or 5 years ago, it was in the annals of fighting fraud, compliance. We were using it in some of the CS spaces. So no one really understood it. Now, obviously, when you go on to Netflix and you see kind of you're like, well, how did they know that these are the things I like, right? So people started to get a sense of it. But now that we've actually democratized the use of it in like a true kind of consumer app that people can now use, I think people are beginning to embrace it and understand it, because it's just like I said, just like Google or people paying on Venmo or whatever, right? It just becomes now part of, as you start to weave it into the consumer ecosystem, you start to gain that level of adoption and understanding, and people then begin to say, okay, I'm no longer now not understanding it, I'm actually using it. I understand exactly what's happening now. How do I become part of it? And versus it being done onto me, I'm actually now part of the process.
Democratization creates exposure, which helps you limit that. Raghu, you were going to.
I have a different take on this, and also looking at more meta level on how we all need to think about the jobs threat or opportunity with AI. And I always get back to my own dad, was working probably with not a lot of leverage of technology 40 years back. And with all this technology changes that have happened, it's not like I'm working any less harder. I'm probably working more harder. But what changes is the outcome for unit level of work. It's essentially the amount of wealth, amount of production that people can do for unit level of work amplifies significantly. And we all can see and believe that AI is going to amplify it by, several tens and hundreds of multiples for everyone. So what's most likely going to happen is probably not loss of jobs, but it is essentially redefining of what the jobs are going to be, because there is an unprecedented wealth creation opportunity, because there are different set of tasks that all of us can do. And fortunately, in this world, there is no limit for wealth creation. Everybody wants to make as much as possible. So I believe this is a phenomenal opportunity, right from technology creators, suppliers, sellers, to get onto this bandwagon and see this as unprecedented wealth creation opportunity. And another a bit of information is that always with the advent of new technology, the wealth creation that happens over a decade or 2 decades completely supersedes all the wealth creation that's been historically done to that point. Like internet has probably created more wealth in the last 30 years than the entire industrial economy and history of the world till that point of time. And AI is clearly, I believe, that point where it's going to supersede the wealth creation historically at this point of time, and everyone is going to have to contribute to make that happen.
Dan, you wanted to add on that?
Yeah, I was going to say, I agree with all of the points. I think there's real risk for automation of kind of mundane tasks, low-skill workers for sure. I think there's going to be an up-leveling. I personally think you're much more likely to be replaced by somebody that knows how to leverage AI as opposed to somebody that doesn't. I always tease our marketing team when they ask me to proofread something. I'm like, just put it through ChatGPT first before you send it to me. Like, but these are the tools. Like they can do, they're amazing at being able to help you just speed up work and first drafts. I think there's really a lot of onus on the businesses for all of our companies to actually help people understand how to leverage these technologies. As a technologist, this is just my personal belief, as opposed to fighting against it. I find it somewhat amusing when I hear teachers not letting their students use ChatGPT because as they progress through their life, these tools are going to be more prevalent and better and smarter than what they're capable of today. Sure. So I really focus on how do you help people understand how to leverage them as to fight against them, because fighting against technology tends not to win. And then the last piece, as I said, is I think it's on us to really take it to the next level and really dive into understanding, what are the capabilities and how can we leverage these.
Yeah, we're going to move on to the next topic, but just one thing to add on that, and we could probably talk about that topic for the next 15 minutes, which we won't do, but just to put the thought in everybody's mind, I think the one challenge then back to corporate America, and I'm thinking about Liz, who runs HR for us, right, is that our measurements of busy need to change in the model, though, that you were talking about, Raghu. Like, that's the one thing to think about. If you have a worker in development, let's say, who can produce 14 hours of code in 2 hours and then goes to the beach, are they busy, right? And how do we, we're so into this butts and seats model for productivity, right? I see you, I'm busy. Remember that commercial with the guy in the I'm busy. Like, something we're going to have to think about as we go through this. All right, let's move on to the next topic. So AI systems can amplify the biases of developers and data sources, leading to discriminatory outcomes. This can have serious consequences for marginalized groups. So, I'm going to throw this one out there, to the overall group. But before I do that, I'm going to give you an example that sort of popped off the page as we were pulling these slides together. So you all recall this slide. Raghu talked about this one earlier, okay? And this was, we asked ChatGPT to tell us, what are the technologies that you use, okay? And here's what it came back with. I then asked it to share the actual sources of those statements. And when you look at it, the words were pretty much copied exactly right to left, but it omitted one thing around machine learning, and it just didn't share with us in the pretty definition without being explicitly programmed. Now, maybe it thought it wasn't important, but maybe, just maybe, the AI is saying, hey, I don't need to take a shot at myself. Here's another one. On the definition slide, with the crazy, I don't even know what that was probably like a neural network. I don't know what it thought it looked like, but it gave a definition and an important statement. Now, you all went to school and took Grammar 101 and you wrote your first paper and it said, if you're going to define something, then tell us what's good and tell us what's bad. It has the same language learning models that we have in the way that we learned. It should write the way we write, except it didn't say anything negative. It just gave us the good story. Now, these are skinny, they're small, and this is about what ChatGPT is choosing, and there's the whole other part of how you inform it with biased information, of course. But just a little bit of an example. So let's just chat about AI bias for a minute. Karen, you started on that, but earlier, but Raghu, go ahead.
Yeah. So again, I have a completely different take on it. Is if I look at bias, we need to look at whether are we moving the needle in the right direction or on the wrong direction. Technology by default is biased, because all the software that's written is explicitly written code by an individual, right? And it is prone to bias of that particular individual. And if you just see the World Wide Web content, it's all in English. 99.99% is in English. So it is biased towards English, speaking audience already.
Yeah.
What AI, I believe, is doing is actually moving this bias in a positive frame because it is core set of algorithms. It's not dependent on somebody's explicitly written code, but it's taking a broad level of data and reacting dynamically to user inputs. I'm not saying the bias is zero, but I clearly see that it is much lesser bias than explicitly written code that's today.
Got it. So it's not the Google algorithm.
Yeah.
It's taking the broad approach and saying, I might say something crazy, but this is a pretty good cross swatch of what the world thinks because I'm reading Truth Social and I'm reading Twitter at the same time. Right?
But I would say that what we've discovered in our conversations with different industries is they do have to be able to now start to explain actually what are the actual end results of what they're getting from their models. Obviously, we see it more regular in the regulated environments, such as financial services and the like. I think the AI Act in Europe will be just a game changer, just like GDPR was a game changer when they deployed that as well. So the fundamental fact is, as you go out to customers, it is important to talk and position the conversation about, listen, we all know you're leveraging OpenAI or open models and all of that, but as you think about true customer engagement and interaction, where customer information might be shared, account information, privileged and confidential information that is unique between you as the enterprise to your end customer, that's extremely important that you do think about how you're leveraging open source capability. And so as we start to talk to companies, you want to make sure that the companies you engage with to provide the capability has the size and scale of 1,500 customers, for example, globally, has a global footprint, to your point, can understand multimodal type situations because now vision and tone all get incorporated into actually the overall expression. And I think for us at Uniphore, like privacy, trust, and safety are the most critical things that we're forward leaning with. And we actually are saying we need to embrace the regulatory aspects of what's out there because it's going to keep people safe and hopefully not create a bigger divide or some type of bias in the end. But I think it's extremely important that people recognize that those companies that actually can bring wealth of data to the actual enterprise solution, I think similar to what you called out, those are the types of companies that should be engaged in those sales opportunities because they have an understanding of both not only the bias potential impact, but also the downstream regulatory or compliance challenges that a company might face that they want to be able to manage.
100%. We're going to get into regulatory in 1 minute, so hold on that. I was thinking to myself, do I jump ahead? But let's have a fun one. We're going to jump into the matrix for a minute, all right? We said in the title, is this how the world ends? So let's just talk about that for a minute. Some experts warn that AI systems could become so advanced that they surpass human intelligence and become impossible to control. This scenario is known as superintelligence and could pose an existential risk to humanity. All right, so depending on how you feel, about examples and bias in conversation, we're crossing over here, we're into sci-fi, all right? We could spend an hour on this one, but let's just do rapid fire. Is the singularity near? Okay, well, that was intense. If you're still with us, it's because you're as excited about what you just heard as I was participating in. And so if you want to make sure that you get to see the rest of the episode with Dan, Karen, Tushar, and Raghu, and get the rest of our conversation about artificial intelligence, make sure that you follow The Bridge with Scott Kinka on your favorite podcast platform and tune in next week. Listen, if you made it this far, there must have been some good content, or you're just a fan or a relative of mine. In either case, we appreciate you spending your most valuable asset with us, your time. We don't take that lightly. We'd also like to say one more time that we're appreciative of Bridgepoint Technologies and their belief and sponsorship of this show. We hope that if you or someone you know is thinking about your company's digital transformation, or simply the next IT project that you may not have the resources, budget, or time to get to, I'm sure that Bridgepoint, one of the country's fastest growing technology advisory and procurement firms, can help. Check out bridgepointtechnologies.com Don't forget the E on Bridgepoint, or simply reach out to me at skinka, SKINKA, at bpt3.net. Also take a minute, please, if you would, to give us a 5-star review on your favorite platform. It helps give us the visibility to reach other people like you. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Bridge. I'm Scott Kinka, and until next time, there's a lot of noise out there in business and in life. Do what you can to be the signal. Thanks.